beautiful people, and welcome to my channel. It's Ebony and Botany. Thank you for joining me today. If you are new, I do videos on hospitality and tourism on the continent of Africa, while also giving you a little dose and insight into my daily life and lifestyle. I have a company that specializes in hospitality and tourism in Tanzania, Zanzibar, and eventually I will be featuring Eswatini as well. And we specialize in giving 5-star white glove service to those people who would like to maintain or have a 5-star life while they are living or visiting Tanzania or Zanzibar. So that gives you a little bit insight about me and what I do. So now let's get started with a little bit of story time. Are you going to be part of it? Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm always part of it.
It's Ebony and Botany and
Camille and Botany.
I have a little visitor with me today. She wanted to be a part of this vlog. So today I'm just going to do a little story time to give you guys some insight into that Tanzanian wife life. I've had a lot of people ask me, you know, what it's like being married into a different culture. So I just wanted to give some fun insight about my personal experiences and what it's like being married to someone who's from a completely different culture than what you are from yourself. Sometimes there's a lot of misconceptions that, you know, because we are the same race, that our cultures are very similar, which that is very much not true. We both come from vastly different cultures. I am African American and he is African from Tanzania, and I'm from the DMV. I'm from Virginia, originally born and raised, so the DMV area, so Northern Virginia. And you know, that comes with all of the things that I was raised with, and then he was born and raised in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. So some differences that, you know, I noticed right away between our two cultures is I come from a family background that's pretty loud and expressive and direct and blunt, and he comes from a culture that's very quiet and calm and proper and not as direct. So when we first got married, one of the things that we said would be something that we would implement for sure is making sure that when we had children, they understood both of their cultures as equally as possible and understood that they were Tanzanian and Black American. So we incorporated a lot of those Tanzanian cultures and a lot of the Black American cultures and just into their daily life. That meaning teaching them Swahili. Do you want to tell them some Swahili words?
Sure.
How do you say hello?
Habari.
How do you say you're welcome?
Karibu.
How do you say thank you?
Asante.
Okay, goodbye. Goodbye.
I can't move.
So some things that were vastly different when we first met, got engaged, and decided to get married was the manner in which they planned their weddings. So in the Tanzanian culture, you have several, I guess I would call it, engagements that you do before you get married to celebrate the union of two people. So you would have a send-off, which is like our version of an engagement party. You have a kitchen party, which is our version of a bridal shower. And then you have the actual wedding ceremony. So they're called different things, but those two things are kind of very similar in cultures, where the kitchen party is really just for women. The send-off is for both of them. It's like an engagement party. And then you have the actual wedding. The one thing that was really different for me, and the first thing that we encountered really emphasizing the differences in our two cultures, was the planning of the wedding itself. So in the Tanzanian culture, you have a committee, and it's typically a committee of men that will put together the planning of the wedding. And they also have a committee that's in charge of the funds or the financing of the wedding. And the financing of wedding comes from the community of people that know you, that love you, that have any type of dealings with you, and they all contribute a certain amount of money to the union of these two people. Well, that was something that was foreign to me, because while a lot of Americans will bring envelopes of cash or gifts at your wedding, it is the bride side traditionally, or the bride and groom, who do all the planning of the wedding. So one thing that came up was on my husband's side is, you know, his cousins and friends and men were kind of expecting that they would be on this committee to plan a wedding. So I, as an American bride, you know, was like, a bunch of men are not planning my wedding. As a American girl, you know, you dream your whole life about planning your wedding. I wanted to clip out the little papers. I wanted to do the whole bride thing. I wanted to take a little scanner and scan all the items in the aisle and all that type of thing. You know, the whole just enjoyment and everything that I wanted to go through, all those stages that I had dreamt of since I was a little girl. So we had to find a lot of ways to just mesh the two cultures together, where we were honoring both sides in some way, shape, or form, but maybe not, you know, doing everything in its entirety from that culture, so that we could bring the two cultures together. So ultimately, you know, I had I was planning the wedding with my family in the traditional way that I'm accustomed to, but then we incorporated a lot of Tanzanian touches in our ceremony. One was that I wore a Maasai outfit, a traditional Maasai outfit, as my reception outfit, instead of changing into a second you know, less formal wedding dress. Like you see a lot of American brides wear their wedding dress and then they change into something that's you know, like a more formal kind of cocktail gown. So for my reception, I changed it to a traditional Maasai outfit to honor my husband's culture. We had little place settings where we named all the countries in the world that the two of us had been to combined together. And then we just added a lot of African and African American touches to our wedding. So that's one example of how bringing the two cultures together has been, for me, from my personal experience in dealing with a completely different culture. The other differences, I would say, are just more just characteristics of where you come from. As an American, I'm definitely much more lively, and I am more direct, very blunt, very expressive as far as, you know, my personality and how I deal with people. His culture as a whole, they are definitely much more calm and not as expressive. One thing I say is they don't show hardly any emotion. It's hard to tell if someone is even upset with you. So that was something I had to really get used to navigating, because there's just not a lot of facial expression going on. And, you know, for me, I mean, I'm nothing but facial expression. So that was a difference in culture as well. When it came to our children, that wasn't as much of a challenge per se, as it more was, I felt like homework for me personally as their mother. Because I was a stay-at-home mom for such a long time, and my children were primarily with me because my husband was, you know, climbing that corporate ladder. I had to take it upon myself to really learn a lot about the culture so that I could teach them. Because, you know, that old saying in the South is children learn at the knee of the mother, I find to be very true. You know, they copied what I did, they learned from me, they took their cues from me. So if I didn't know a lot about the culture, and if I wasn't able to exhibit a lot of things about the culture, they were never going to learn and I'd be able to identify with their Tanzanian side. So some ways that I ended up doing that, for example, was I learned to cook a lot of Tanzanian dishes, and they ate those dishes from birth on until now, so that we knew in our heads our plan was always to take our children home, and we actually did take our first child home when he was 13 months old.
Okay.
So I made sure that our children were eating Tanzanian food from day one, so that it was not foreign to them. And I have to say, they actually prefer African food to American food. So that's kind of exciting, except for pizza. They love pizza. So that was one thing, is I had to really learn ways to make sure that they could identify with the culture. One being through the biggest ways to identify with any culture is through food and through language. So my children were really small. I really tried to learn a lot of words to say in the language and to say with them in their everyday lives. I admit I've dropped the ball over the years. It's very hard to keep up Swahili, especially if you're in America, because it's just not around you. And I'm not the native, that's not my native language. So, but I've really put forth the effort to try to make sure they at least know some. Right now they're taking Swahili lessons. They've always taken Swahili lessons throughout their upbringing. They have their lessons weekly and sometimes more often than that, so that when they go home, the language is not foreign to them. We make sure to take them to Tanzanian events. We participate in a lot of international events where we represent the country of Tanzania, so they know the Tanzanian flag and they know all those things. So I do the same thing with the Tanzanian side that I do with their Black American side. We learn a lot about civil rights. My father, their grandfather, was a civil rights attorney, so you know that's very important in our household. One thing that we really push forward is equality for all people in our household, not just Black people, but we make sure that they understand their Black heritage and history, as well as understanding advocacy for all people who are suffering in the world. Our family motto is being the change that you want to see. So I try to make sure that, you know, while teaching them about people like Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela and Marcus Garvey and Gandhi and Mother Teresa, we also teach them about Julius Nyerere and, you know, who the current president of Tanzania is right now, Magufuli, and making sure that they understand both sides. And yes, I would say it's, you know, somewhat of a big undertaking, but I feel like it's my duty as their mother to make sure that they understand both sides, so that they are comfortable going back and forth between the two countries. Because it is who they are. They have Tanzanian blood running through them, and it's my duty, even though I'm not Tanzanian, to make sure that they are getting the correct direction and guidance from me. So that required me to really learn a lot about the culture, and you know, I would say that I really do understand the culture quite well, and I've been able to navigate within the culture while still being Ebonie, you know, because this is who I am, take it or leave it. That is something that has been funny and interesting over the years as well, because of course people, when they meet my husband, they expect to see this, you know, quiet little Tanzanian wife, and I am far from it, honey. Okay, far from it. So that's been funny. I mean, I probably have stories for days that I could tell. The one was like the wedding. We just find ways to make sure that you know, not one culture doesn't take over the other. And when we're doing things like when I'm in Tanzania, of course, you know, the primary thing that we do is we focus on the Tanzanian culture, and I think it's a beautiful culture. I'm in love with the culture as much as I'm in love with my husband. So you know, when we're in the U.S., by default, my kids are, you know, Americanized because they're in America, so I don't have to do much there. You know, we love a 4th of July parade like anybody else. So we're a very American family. You know, I'm very American, very proud of it. But we're also proud to say that we're a Tanzanian family as well. So that gives you a little insight about this Tanzanian wife life and how we've kind of navigated it in the very beginning. I will do another story time probably soon and give you guys some insight. I've been in this for so long that sometimes I kind of forget it's just normal for me. So it's hard for me to even remember some examples of some things, but when people ask me questions, it'll sometimes jar my memory, and I'm like, oh yeah, so this is how we kind of did this, because this is just like our norm. But you know, if you have any questions, comments, let me know, and maybe I'll do another video answering some of your questions, give you some insight of how I navigate living this Tanzanian wife life.